"You're obsolete, Elena. Effective immediately." That was the first thing I heard at 8:51 on a Tuesday morning. No greeting, no face, just a black square on Zoom labeled M. Bradford. I froze for half a second, my hand hovering over the trackpad. After 17 years at Stravara Technologies, this was how it ended. From a woman I'd only met twice, both times in passing, both times while she called me Legacy Infrastructure. The second black square blinked on HR, Internal Affairs. Another faceless voice started reading a script, slow and careful, like a robot avoiding emotion. "Your role has been eliminated due to restructuring. Your severance package has been mailed to your home address." The absurd calm in her voice made something in me harden. I looked at my reflection in the black of the screen, 49 years old, dark hair tied back. A woman who'd designed the very system running the servers this call depended on. I straightened my shoulders. "You're firing the person who built your backbone," I said evenly. "Do you even know what RavX does?" Melissa's voice, cool and hollow. "That's irrelevant. We're modernizing." "Right," I murmured. "Good luck with that." Then, slower, almost kind. "We're done here." I ended the call before she could respond. The quiet after was deafening. Only the rain outside filled the apartment, soft against the glass. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the laptop. No anger, no tears. Just a hollow pulse under my ribs. 17 years gone in 60 seconds. I pushed the chair back, stood, and walked to the kitchen. The kettle whistled as I filled a cup with mint tea, hands steady out of pure habit. From my window, the Seattle skyline looked blurred by rain. The company's logo still glowed faintly from the rooftop of the tower I had helped design the power grid for. Somewhere between the steam rising from my cup and the echo of Melissa's voice, I realized something small and dangerous. She had no idea what she'd just erased or what she hadn't. I turned off the laptop screen. Outside, the city kept humming, as if nothing had changed, but it had. I still remember my first day at Stravara. It was 2006, the year Seattle felt like it was breathing technology from every open window. The company was nothing but a cramped basement office on East Lake Avenue, 5 engineers, 2 servers, and a coffee machine that leaked steam more than water. I was 31 then, with a degree, a worn-out laptop, and more conviction than sense. My first task was to fix a broken data stream that froze every 6 minutes. No one else wanted to touch it. I stayed through the night and found the problem buried in a single misplaced bracket. When it finally ran clean, I remember laughing out loud in the dark, the monitor's glow painting the room pale blue. That was how RavEX began, not as a product, but as a patch. Within months, I rewrote its core architecture from scratch. By the time Series A funding arrived, the system could predict and isolate security breaches faster than any federal platform. We didn't even have a name for it yet. I just called it my backbone. Then the people came. More funding, more floors, more executives who spoke in abstractions. Somewhere along the way, my name began to fade from the diagrams. RavEX Core, Stravara Proprietary. I still have the slide from that presentation. It was the first time someone else took credit in public, and I said nothing. Owen joined during those middle years, a quiet, curious kid from MIT who drank too much coffee and asked too many questions. I liked him for that. I taught him how to build stable structures, how to design systems that didn't break when people did. Now, he leads one of the divisions that reports to Melissa Bradford. I can't blame him for that. He's young. And young people still believe the ladder goes up forever. The older I got, the more invisible I became. They started calling my department Legacy Systems. I used to smile at the word. Then one morning, I realized it no longer meant foundation. It meant outdated. That was when I stopped smiling. That night. The rain finally stopped. The city outside my window went still, as if it, too, needed to catch its breath. I stood for a long time staring at my reflection in the glass before turning toward the closet. Inside, on the top shelf, was a wooden box I hadn't opened in years. It was my father's. He'd kept it locked under his desk when I was growing up, filled with legal pads, fountain pens, and thin manila folders that smelled faintly of cedar. When he died heart attack at 68, I brought the box home but never had the courage to open it. That night, after Melissa's call, I finally did. The lid creaked, and the smell hit me like memory itself. Inside were his old notes on patent law, a cracked leather briefcase, and a single envelope labeled in his handwriting, "Elena, keep this." I unfolded the yellowing paper. His words, written in dark blue ink, were as sharp as the day he wrote them. Never sign away what you've created until they've earned your trust. He'd told me that the night before I joined Stravara full-time. Back then, RAVX Core was still just an experiment version 0.9 alpha, something I was building in my apartment after work. He'd sat at my kitchen table, glasses low on his nose, reading the prototype specs like they were poetry. "File it under your own entity," he said. "You can always license it later, but once you sign over ownership, it's gone. Corporate loyalty goes one direction until it doesn't." With his help, I registered a tiny LLC in Delaware. We called it Arden Systems, a name he chose from an old Shakespeare line he loved, "Under the Greenwood Tree." He said it sounded peaceful, safe somewhere no one could touch what was mine. After he died, I couldn't bring myself to dissolve the company. I kept paying the renewal fees every year, like a ritual. No one at Stravara ever asked. No one ever knew. And now, as I traced his handwriting with my thumb, I realized he'd given me something stronger than advice. He'd given me a way out. I pulled the worn file from the top shelf and carried it to the kitchen table like it was something fragile. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the ink still read sharp. It was the original licensing agreement I'd negotiated with Stravara's legal team back when RAVX was a promise instead of a product line. I had kept a copy locked away, more habit than hope, because my father insisted I always keep proof of what I built. I read slowly, aloud to myself at first, then softer, letting the legal phrasing slide over me until the meaning settled. The clauses were dry, bureaucratic sentences dressed in boilerplate. But the two he had made me fight for sat in the middle of the document like small, stubborn truths. Clause 8.2. No renaming, rebranding, or public attribution of the licensed system shall occur without prior written approval of the original architect. Clause 11.3. No transfer, derivative work, or sublicensing shall be executed without written consent of the original architect. I remembered the argument with Stravara's counsel, the polite man with the tired eyes, when he asked why I needed such protections. "Trust," he'd said. I'd smiled and said, "Trust is cheap. Signatures are not." At the time, they laughed it off as caution. Even Owen joked that I was paranoid. They filed the agreement and never looked at it again. Then I pulled up the video feed from TechCrunch on my laptop and watched Melissa on stage a few weeks earlier. She'd been radiant in an off-white suit, all explosive smiles and polished slides, announcing Innovat X with the kind of language investors eat for breakfast disruption, brand evolution, scale. She had no idea what the system did. She only knew how to sell a narrative. She'd renamed the thing I called backbone into a buzzword and rolled cameras for the press. The word breach felt small at first, then very loud. My chest went still. It wasn't dramatic, no cinematic reveal, just the hard, undeniable logic of paperwork, a public rebrand, a clause written in lawful English, a signature long ago on a provisional filing that predated my employment. I set the documents down, palms flat on the kitchen wood. I could have called a law firm, screamed into a phone, or marched back to the office and demanded apologies. Instead, I sat very still and let the kettle reach a boil. The city hummed. Inside, the files hummed louder. 3 days later, an email arrived. 3 days passed before I opened my laptop again. The screen glared white against the dim kitchen light, as if it resented being woken. I wasn't sure what I was looking for: closure, distraction, Maybe proof that the world had kept turning without me. My inbox had filled with automated notices, benefits termination, access revocation, archived drives, and then one subject line that didn't belong: request for confidential conversation. The sender's name made me sit up. Richard Quinn, Chief Technical Officer, Virilia Technologies. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Virilia was Stravara's oldest rival, the company we whispered about in boardrooms, the name that appeared on every competitive slide deck as the enemy to beat. I clicked, Ms. Ward, we have reason to believe that RAVX Core V0.9 Alpha remains registered to Arden Systems, LLC. If this is accurate, I would like to arrange a private meeting to discuss a potential licensing opportunity. Complete discretion assured. Richard Quinn. I read it twice, then a third time, each word reshaping the silence around me. My fingers hovered above the keyboard but didn't type. For 17 years, I'd given everything to one company: time, sleep, pieces of myself that don't grow back. To even consider meeting with a rival felt like betrayal, like rewriting my own loyalty. Outside, rain streaked the glass again, soft and rhythmic. I poured another cup of tea and stared at the steam curling upward, the same way my father's pipe smoke once did when he worked late. His words echoed in that quiet space of memory. Corporate loyalty goes one direction until it doesn't. I pressed play on the old voicemail just to hear his voice one more time. It crackled with age but landed sharp as ever. Protect your work, not the people who borrow it. When it ended, I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly, and opened my browser. The cursor blinked on the flight booking page. Patient, waiting. I bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco the night before my flight. I pulled every file I'd ever kept from the closet and spread them across the living room floor. Legal folders, licensing drafts, emails printed on fading letterhead, 17 years of quiet diligence now stacked in uneven towers. The city hummed outside, but I barely heard it. I read every page twice, sometimes 3 times, tracing each signature as if it were a vein carrying proof of my own existence. The provisional filing for RAVX Core V0.9 Alpha was still crisp, sealed under the letterhead of Arden Systems, LLC, time-stamped 6 weeks before my employment contract with Stravara. The clauses my father made me include, 8.2 and 11.3, sat there in black ink, unaltered. My initials beside his old signature at the bottom. I whispered the words to myself, line by line, until they felt carved into the air. It was after midnight when I decided to call Patricia Lowe. She'd been my father's law partner for 20 years before retiring to Santa Fe. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. I didn't expect her to pick up. She did. Her voice, older but steady, came through the speaker. Elena Ward. It's been a long time. I told her everything: RAVX, the firing, Melissa's rebrand, the clauses. There was a pause on the line long enough for me to imagine her glasses sliding down her nose, her eyes scanning invisible documents from memory. Then, quietly, she said, "Send me the filings." I emailed her the folder and waited, pacing between the stacks of paper. 20 minutes later, her reply came. Every line checks out. You own it. They never even read the filing dates. It's airtight. Elena, you did everything right. For a moment, the room felt weightless. All the years of loyalty, the missed weekends, the quiet erasures, suddenly they had a shape again. Not revenge, not victory, just truth, clean and unarguable. I gathered the files into a neat stack, turned off the lamp, and sank into the couch. For the first time since the morning of the firing, I slept through the night. The Virilia offices overlooked the San Francisco Bay glass and steel softened by the morning fog that rolled in from the water. I arrived early, coffee still warm in my hand, pulse steady only because I forced it to be. The receptionist greeted me by name before I introduced myself, and that small courtesy being known made something tighten in my chest. Richard Quinn met me in the lobby. He looked older than in his conference photos, salt gray hair, a face lined from years of building rather than posing. "Elena," he said, shaking my hand. "I'm glad you came." His grip was firm, his tone deliberate. Not a pitchman's tone, not a shark's, a builder's. He led me into a conference room framed by glass walls and silence. No entourage, no assistants pretending to take notes. Just a single folder resting in the center of the table. He slid it toward me. 10-year exclusive license. He said, $720 million, distributed over the term. You'll lead the architecture division, chief technical architect, full creative control. I sat down slowly. The pages inside were crisp and unassuming, stamped with Virilia's logo in the corner. I read every line twice, my pen untouched beside me. The clauses were fair, the royalties transparent, the terms respectful. It was the first contract in my career that didn't read like a trap. Richard watched me quietly. "We don't hire pedigrees," he said at last. "We hire architects." Something inside me flickered, something I hadn't felt in years. I nodded once, almost a bow, then signed my name where the ink waited. The pen moved slower than I expected, as if the years behind it were heavy. When it was done, I closed the folder and exhaled through my nose. Steady and complete. No speeches, no vindication. Just the sound of paper settling against the table. Richard reached across and shook my hand again. "Welcome to Virilia," he said. The fog outside began to lift, sunlight sliding across the water. For the first time in 17 years, I felt the weight shift off my shoulders, back to where it belonged. I smiled faintly. Let's get to work. The news broke on a Monday. I was still half asleep when my phone began vibrating across the kitchen counter. Headlines stacked one after another, glowing in the blue light of the screen. Virilia Technologies announces exclusive partnership with Arden Systems creator of Rav's Core. I read the line twice. The words didn't quite feel real until I saw my own name in the subheading. For a long time, I just stood there, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. By noon, the story was everywhere. Industry blogs, finance pages, tech podcasts. Everyone wanted to know how Stravara had lost ownership of its flagship system. The numbers came next, a 30% stock drop in 2 days. Trading halted for volatility. Analysts calling it the most significant IP oversight in recent tech history. I didn't need to watch the footage, but I did. A recording had surfaced on social media, shaky and muffled from a hidden phone during an emergency meeting at Stravara headquarters. Melissa's voice cut through the static, higher than I remembered. "Who the hell is Arden Systems?" Someone in the background tried to calm her. Another voice, her father's, tired and brittle, answered quietly. "The name on the patent, apparently." Silence followed, broken only by the scrape of a chair and a microphone clicking off. The clip ended there, but the damage was irreversible. By Wednesday, investors had filed the first lawsuits. A federal contractor froze its pending contract with Stravara until ownership could be verified. On Friday, the board released a statement Thomas Bradford to step down as CEO, effective immediately. The city outside my window moved as it always did traffic, fairy horns, rain streaking down the glass. Nothing about it celebrated or condemned what had happened. I didn't post a thing, didn't call anyone. I simply sat at the table, the light shifting slowly across the room, and let the quiet fill every space that ambition once had. The company I built had cracked from within. All I'd done was remove my name from its glass. The Virilia lab didn't feel like a corporate floor. It felt like motion. Screens hummed softly. The air smelled faintly of solder and espresso, and sunlight spilled across long tables crowded with prototypes. It was the kind of place Stravara used to be before the glass walls and brand consultants. My team was small 6 engineers, half of them under 30, all of them curious. They asked questions that reminded me of who I'd been once, before meetings replaced making. On my second week, one of the interns, a quiet woman from Portland, asked me why we reviewed contracts during code reviews. I told her the truth because the fine print is just another kind of architecture. If it collapses, everything you've built falls with it. She smiled like she understood. Days moved fast, steady. We tested new frameworks, refined integrations, rebuilt old code for speed and resilience. Every decision went through my hands, but not out of ego, out of care. The work finally belonged to people who treated it as something real, not a brand to sell. One evening, as the lab lights dimmed, I noticed an email in my inbox from Owen Walsh. He wrote that Stravara had laid off nearly half of engineering. He didn't ask for a job. He just said, "I miss building things that matter." I remembered the kid who once fell asleep on his keyboard after a 30-hour debugging sprint. I replied within a minute, "Send me your resume." 2 weeks later, he stood in the doorway of the lab, a little older, a little quieter. When the introductions were over, he lingered by my desk. "How did you know?" he asked. Back then. "To protect yourself like that?" I looked at him for a long moment. "I didn't protect myself," I said. "I protected the work. The rest followed." He nodded slowly, absorbing it like it was code he'd someday understand better. That night, when the lab emptied, I stood by the window overlooking the bay. The lights of the city flickered across the water, alive, uncertain, and still worth building toward. The city was quiet again. A late drizzle tapped against the windows, soft and rhythmic, like the sound of my father's pen when he used to write late into the night. I sat at my desk long after the last message from the team had come in, the lab empty, the code repository silent. The screen in front of me was blank except for the blinking cursor steady, patient, alive. Without thinking, I reached for my phone and opened the old voicemail I'd kept for years. My father's voice filled the room, scratchy and warm. Corporate loyalty goes one direction, until it doesn't. Trust me on this. Elena. I'd heard it so many times, the words had stopped meaning anything, but that night, they sounded different, less like a warning, more like a benediction. I saved the file again, this time renaming the folder, Legacy. The word settled somewhere deep, no longer sharp, no longer defensive. Outside, the rain began to fade. The first streaks of light brushed over the rooftops of Seattle, turning the clouds pale gold. The skyline looked softer in the dawn, the edges blurred where glass met mist. I watched the light climb the Space Needle and spread east toward the hills, touching everything the storm had washed clean. On the desk, my laptop chimed a reminder from the development tracker. New project RAVX Horizon, Draft 1. I opened it. Empty framework, no deadlines, no board oversight, just the quiet possibility of beginning again. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I started typing slowly at first, then with rhythm. The code unfolded line by line, each one cleaner than the last. It didn't feel like rebuilding. It felt like breathing. When I paused, sunlight filled the room completely, catching on the photo frame beside the monitor. My father, young, smiling at a conference table, a pen in his hand. I touched the edge of the frame and whispered, "We did it right." Then I turned back to the screen. The future was waiting. And this time, it carried my signature.